everyone. Thank you so much for coming along. It's lovely to see you. My name is Jess Anson. I am events manager for Rusty Quill, and I'll be leading the panel with these lovely people today. So we are here to talk about a show called Neon Inkwell, which is one of our side shows where we get lots of creators, indie creators, to pitch us their stories, and we can turn them into incredible podcasts, like Brendan here, who has created Rez High. Today we're going to be talking about how retro gaming influenced the creation of Rez High, accessibility in gaming and in podcasting. And actually I'm going to pass over to Brendan, who can tell us a bit more about the project.
Hello. So Neon Inkwell's an anthology series, and probably the most famous anthology series in the world at the moment, probably Black Mirror. And if you look at Black Mirror, every story seems to be about, here's a bit of technology, here's how it's terrible and it's evil and it's going to destroy everything. And I'm not sure I disagree. I think they're quite right a lot of the time about some of the technology they call out. But I thought it might be interesting to tell a story about some good people doing something good with some technology, and that's what Rez High is. And it might not have been intended to be as good and benevolent a piece of technology, but in the hand of the good people, it ends up being so. I'll say that one of the people absent from our panel today is Elizabeth Moffat, who's the executive producer of Neon Inkwell, and I pitched her a few ideas, and she liked this one. We had a meeting, and I prepared a little slide package before the meeting, and she was on one end of a Zoom call because she's in New Zealand, and I was on the other end of the Zoom call, and I was looking at my slides, and she said at some point very early in the presentation, she said, I'd really like to do a show that's got much more broad representation in it. For example, we've not done a show with a character who has Down syndrome. And I was like, hang on a minute, let me get slide 7. And lo and behold, that was part of the pitch. And she saw a lot of potential in that as something that Rusty Quill wanted to do in their work. But she liked the whole pitch, and it's taken a long while for us to get here. But we will shortly be playing you the trailer for this show. And the show is a sci-fi show set in a distant future in Yorkshire. And it's about a bunch of young people who go out and scavenge scraps, and they find a very unusual device. And this device contains a virtual recreation of a 1979 Grange Hill style high school. I think that's all you need to know at this point.
Yeah, should we play the trailer?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
They used to call this place Yorkshire, hundreds of years ago. Now it's mostly sea, but we're still here. The few of us who live in Rivermill.
I hate it up here. We should have met somewhere else.
Give me the top 3 reasons you hate the Buckaroo.
1, it's all the way at the top of the climb. 2, it's always really muggy. And 3, all these boxes are disgusting things screwing and then eating each other. It's revolting.
There's not much left of the past. Scraps, mostly rust and rubbish. But sometimes we find something good, something strange, something we might be able to learn from.
Prepare to have your minds blown.
Welcome to Rez High, your virtual recreation of a 1979 London comprehensive.
It's like a dream, but a dream where you're awake.
Reflex, where did all those people over there come from? Who are they?
They're not real. They're part of the dream.
What a waste for a dream. Where's all the sword fighting and
Sex?
I were gonna say kissing.
There used to be a better world, Dogwood. Right here. I'm gonna find out what happened to it. Then maybe we'll have some idea how to undo things and get it back.
Mission 1. Kiss chase. Your crush wants to meet you. Escape your class, find your crush, and kiss them. Good luck.
So, history is being held hostage unless I kiss somebody to get it. Slagging crudlark. For a detailed recreation of the ancient world, it doesn't actually tell us much about the ancient world.
What were you expecting? A world on fire? Floods coming through every doorway?
This machine is our only chance to find out why the world ended and just maybe how to undo it. Any risk is worth it.
Mission 2. Bully for you. Mad Monk the school bully is hot on your tail. Stay out of his way until break time ends.
Dogwood,
Mad Monk is looking for you.
He's going to clobber me if he catches me.
He's going to clobber you if he catches you.
I can run, or I can hide.
You can run,
Or you can hide.
Just as soon as you let me.
but whatever you're going to do it now.
Mission 3, Heist School. The history exam is fast approaching and you're doomed to fail. Your only hope is the exam answers locked in the head safe.
All of the people, all the weird missions, they're not helpful at all. The people inside Rez High don't even seem to know their world is about to end. Turn the firewall off for me, and then confirm you've done it.
I'm doing it now. The wall between worlds is coming down.
Whoa. Oh, okay. This doesn't feel very safe.
No, but then again, none of this is.
Rusty Quill presents Rez High. To listen, subscribe to Neon Inkwell wherever you get your podcasts.
There were loads more things at Tuck's shop I wanted to try.
Katie edited that, composed the music and did all the editing and is doing everything on the show. So a round of applause for Katie.
Well, that's a good point, actually. So we have a proper introduction of the people on the panel.
Well, there you go.
Go, go.
Okay. So I am in charge of post-production. I was going to say I'm the post-production lead, but I'm literally the only person doing it. So if I had a team, it would also be me. So yeah, I'm a composer and a sound designer. I work pretty much exclusively in audio drama at this point. And on this project, I'm also editing the dialogue and mixing and mastering. So everything which is not writing or acting, basically.
Hello, I'm Loza. I'm an actor and voiceover artist, and I play Reflex in Rez High. Also a disability advocate, and overall just a bit of a nerd for all things gaming. So that's me.
You're in the right place. Yeah. So, Brendan, what was it that made you want to tell this story through the lens of video games and virtual reality?
When Hunger Games was huge, like really huge, suddenly lots of people were talking about YA books, and particularly dystopian YA books. And there was an article in the New York Times by in the New Yorker by Laura Miller called Fresh Hell. And she put forward this idea that the one reason a lot of dystopic YA was popular with teenagers is that it reflected their life. And these situations were metaphors for high school. And I was thinking about this and I thought, I wonder how they actually cope with high school. Right, so like the one situation these characters in Divergent or Hunger Games or whatever don't go in is the situation it's a metaphor for. And I thought, well, I wonder what happened if you took these characters and actually put them in a high school setting. And then I thought about, well, what's that about, right? What is high school about? What would be going back to high school? What would that be about? And once I started thinking about a post-apocalyptic future and school being something of the past, I thought about characters who like teenagers in high school, are on the cusp, right? And some of them could be very forward-looking and be ready to get out of there. And Dogwood, our character, is always very interested in what's next. And Josie is very interested in what she can learn about the past. So she's very past-focused and not ready to move on. Not at all ready to move on, wants to go backwards. And Reflex is in the moment and wants to make now work and is interested in how whatever they're looking at that time, how it works and taking it apart. So I've got these three characters who've got completely different attitudes towards time. And if you put them in a situation in a small culture in the future and it's like, fix this, they've all got very different ideas about how it should be fixed. And, you know, some stuff's been going on recently where a lot of people who I don't agree with are trying to drag stuff backwards politically. And I wanted to look at where that urge comes from and how we can do better than that, and how if we look to our young people, they can sometimes be showing us a way forward a lot of the time. But what's this got to do with video games? Well, because if you look at the Rusty Quill, any Rusty Quill logo, when you see it, normally it says underneath, change the story, change the world. And this is almost a sense of change the game, change the world, right? If you change the rules, you can create a better game, a more equitable game. You can make it more fair, make it more fun, make it play better, and then you can learn how that might apply in the real world. And I think that's some of the ideas we're playing with in Rez High. That's all very conceptual.
Well, podcasts often are. And actually, in that vein, this is being told through the lens of a podcast. What are the joys and challenges of doing a story like this through a podcast medium?
So the Rez High device that they find, they put it on their head. And they're there. And I think that's a little bit like putting on your headphones and listening to a good podcast, really. It's really intimate. You're really up close with it. I don't know who listens to a lot of audio drama here or what your favourite audio dramas might be, but I imagine a lot of us got the experience of listening in the dark in our headphones and being entirely transported by it. So this is sort of metaphorically what they're going through is what we're going through, and we can go on that journey with them in this really quite direct way, I think, really. So there's a real intimate bond between what the listener's going through and what the character's going through, which I don't think's true when you're sat watching it on a screen at a distance. Podcasts are in your head in a way that other media aren't necessarily. But that requires a lot of skill to do properly, and that means you need someone like Katie.
Absolutely.
Am I extending this answer? Can you remind me what the question was?
So the joys and maybe not so much joys of making this sort of story in a podcasting.
I agree with everything Brendan just said. When I studied soundtrack, my particular area of interest was about first-person perspectives and points of view and how we represent somebody else's experience of the world through sound. And I read quite a lot of research that had been done on in utero development. Hearing is the first sense we develop, and therefore that kind of just experience of selfhood, which first starts to kind of come into play as we come online as a person, is experienced initially through sound. And I think that this continues throughout our lives to be the case, is that what we hear can sort of get under the skin in a way that what we see or feel. Okay, these are massive generalisations now, but in terms of media, I think sound has the most direct sort of pipeline to our subconscious and to what we're feeling. I also in particular looked at the autistic experience of sound and how that differs from neurotypical experience of sound, which is very important to me. And that sort of keyed me into this idea that what we are hearing might not be the same as what other people are hearing, and how we're experiencing the world therefore might not be the same. And so when I finished studying and started working, audio drama just drew me towards it because of that thing, because it was the best way to represent that first-person experience of the world. And this particular story really capitalises on that. One thing I would add to what Brendan was saying is because the protagonists have information that the game does not, and the game has information that the protagonist does not, we sort of get this misalignment of goals and of ideas about how the world is, which is very, very interesting to play with from somebody whose work is normally about trying to help the audience to sort of understand an environment, but then when the environment doesn't understand the character, we have things like music, which is just playing on a loop and doesn't really care what the protagonists are actually thinking, because the experience of the world as portrayed in the game can only be what the programmers could imagine. And so we were doing things like I tried to score a scene where you couldn't see what was happening, where we had a character sneaking around, but you couldn't actually see the sneaking because that's not something we can depict just in audio very easily. So I sort of adapted the game music to be kind of like a sort of a bit of a sort of Mission Impossible, to try and convey the idea through music that this was what was going on. And the director turned around and said to me, well, that's too close to the character's experience. The game would not. Are we allowed to say bad words?
Let's go with no.
No, the game would not care whether the character is trying to, in this case, get away from the school bully, or whether they are trying to do something completely different. And therefore we had to score it in a sort of non-empathetic way. So I'm very interested in whether or not the audience can sort of feel that tension or not. So that, these are some of the issues I've been thinking with this particular sort of setup that we're working with in the story. Shall I pass the microphone on?
Well, I was going to ask Loza, actually, in terms of recording this, is this, correct me, is this one of your first audio dramas?
Yes, I think it was actually both mine and George, who plays Dogwood. It was both of our first paid voice roles. So I think this was a bit new territory for both of us, and especially for me, my first role being like so well organised. I was like, wow, okay, this has really set me up for the future expectations of other teams. But
brilliantly written as well, of course.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. But yeah, so the joys for me through audio drama for this was the accessible recording format. So for me, as well as being a wheelchair user, I'm autistic as well, and our recording sessions very scheduled. I know exactly what I'm doing. Sit in a dark room for a few hours with Lucy, the director, George and Liv, who are Josie and Dogwood, and then April, who's the producer. Literally just me with these 4 people in a dark room for a few hours, do all of my lines and everything, record everything. We've got breaks. It was very scheduled, worked very nicely for my brain. So that was just fantastic for me. That was the joys of doing it in this format for me, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of our performers find a lot of joy in remote recording.
Yeah.
Like, post-COVID, it's become kind of the norm, hasn't it? Yeah. It was certainly new for Rusty Quill to try and learn. Actually, the next question is about accessibility. They're key components of the Rez High story, accessibility and representation. How does the show explore these themes, both in gaming and more broadly in the world of the story?
Who wants to go first?
I go first, do I? It's what it's really about, I think, at its heart, to not give too much away. I think that we all came into this room today for a door, and somebody chose how wide that door was. And thankfully, it was wide enough that wheelchairs could come through it, but that's not necessarily the case. I worked in an office with a wheelchair user, and the fire alarm went, and he wasn't able to go through the door towards the fire escape. Seems like such a small decision to make, but it is a reminder that people make these choices all the time. And if you put a staircase somewhere instead of a ramp, you've made the choice. That's not part of the world, that's not inherent. People disable other people by making these choices. I think that the majority of us can go. We'll see over the next few days choices that have been made in the world that disable other people. Whether that is a TV show without captions, whether it's a TV show without audio description, whether that's a narrow door, somewhere there's not a lift, a train station you can't use if you're a wheelchair user, whatever it is. There's millions of these things all over the place, and they're choices that people have made. And not to give too much away, but virtual worlds are a little bit more pliable, aren't they? And you can start doing interesting things with them. And Reflex, who's quite good at fixing things, is a character who's quite attuned to some improvements that can be made, and that kickstarts some plot developments. So it's woven into the whole thing, and to not get to the end of the story, but we are moving to some drama that comes out of this.
Yeah, I think the other thing kind of about representation as well, a main theme within the podcast as well is character creation and character customization. I know that I've spoken about it before a lot of the times publicly about modern gaming is coming a long way in terms of more inclusive character customization options. And one thing that I always come across is that you can have a main character who can have any kind of combination of hair colours and hairstyles. Games like Baldur's Gate 3 and other things where you can even customise specific body parts that you'd like, things like that. But one thing that is often not really in there is having the option to have a disabled character, be the character that you want to play as. And I've had a lot of conversations with this about people. All disabled people will have different views. I'm always of the view that there should at least be a choice. Some people use video games as an escape, and sometimes that means that if you're experiencing being disabled every day, sometimes you just want maybe an hour or two where you can go into this virtual world and just be completely separate from everything that you experience every day and have that bit of escape where you don't experience being disabled for a bit. Whereas I'm sometimes the type of person where, like, I would like to see myself in characters, and if that means that I can create a custom character that's got a cane or a wheelchair or something. I think one thing I've said before is, like, obviously I've got pink hair and tattoos. That's never any problem in any kind of situation like fantasy game or whatever, but having a cane or a wheelchair is then all of a sudden too much to ask for. And my wheelchair mobility aids, like, I mean, I've just started customising this one. There is intrinsic part of me as what my pink hair and tattoos are, because they're part of who I am as a person. I use them every day. People see them as part of me. And I would like to have that in a game. I think it's just the choice for me, as long as the option's there. And that's kind of a key theme within Rez High as well, having that option and coming across what happens when that option isn't there, and then you aren't represented and you can't look like what you look like in real life. So that is a really key point within Rez High, and then specifically looking at like accessibility features that are in games as well. Things like audio description, even things like being able to save and pause. They are accessibility features in video games, and that is something that's tackled within Rez High as well, isn't it?
Can I add to that?
Of course you can, sorry. Yeah.
I just wanted to say, and just to, as a real world sort of, I don't know, elaboration or illustration of what I was saying, there is a wheelchair using character who we see within the game, and I went to find sound assets to use to represent the movements of this character. Bearing in mind I probably have access to, I would say, 10,000 footsteps. I found 2 wheelchair sounds that I could use. And it sort of goes a little bit further than just, obviously we need wheelchairs on gravel, and we need wheelchairs on carpet, and we need wheelchairs on wooden flooring the same way we would do with walking. But there is an added dimension of how we use these sounds, and it represents the person. It's an important part of characterization. So I can make footsteps be hesitant, or be dejected and sad as they walk away, or be sort of full of an adrenaline rush as they move forward to challenge someone who has insulted them. And I do not have the assets, without going recording them myself, to do the same for a wheelchair using character. And further than that, digging even deeper into it, what I've been realising is that audiences' ears, they already know that song. They know the footsteps song, so all we have to do is do this thing with the footsteps, and the audiences will intrinsically understand without even having to give it conscious thought. But we have not actually played that song enough for people who are, in this case, wheelchair users, or who interact with the world in some way differently from what is the kind of the 80% norm, or whatever it is, the audience actually cannot make those leaps in the same way. So I think working on this has really, really shown up that deficit of representation in media in kind of quite a granular way for me. Anyway, I'll pass over to Brendan.
Yeah, we're going to teach them, aren't we? We're going to give them some of that experience. I think, what I do want to say is that when I heard Loza had been cast, I went and looked at their YouTube channel, and they have a great video about Baldur's Gate 3 and accessibility and representation. And if you're interested in those subjects in video games, then go and watch that video.
It's clear that video gaming you are a huge video game fan. It's been a massive inspiration for the show. Obviously, we're talking a lot about how modern day gaming has influenced the show. But in terms of retro gaming, what have you taken from that to create the story?
To be honest, modern gay gaming has influenced the game.
I'm sure it has.
But it has. There are a lot of retro game references in this, and some of them are woven in a way that if I don't tell you about them, you won't know they're there. So I'm going to tell you about a couple of them. Did any of you play a game called Mikey in the 80s? It was an arcade game. A little schoolboy would go around a class, and he was collecting hearts, and at the end would give a love letter to a girlfriend. That's a video game where you start at the back of a class, and there's a teacher at the front, and you have to get out of the classroom. Lo and behold, the first mission in this game follows a similar format. But there was also another game called Menace, which was about a schoolboy at the back of a class, and there was a teacher at the front. Anyway, it was a recurring trope in 1980s video games. So of course, we hit that with the first in-game mission. And you did hear in the trailer 3 mission statements, 3 missions that are given to the players of Rez High in this drama. There are more missions than that. We just wanted to introduce you those ideas. But each of those 3 is inspired in some way by things from retro gaming. I think the biggest influence is probably the games School Days and Back to School. I don't know if anybody played those, but there's the main thrust of those was of the first one at least, was trying to get into the headmaster's safe. So we've borrowed that as well. I'm quite proud of that episode because it's a drama. It's got characters, but it's also a bunch of puzzles, and I quite enjoy that. So if you listen to episode 3 with a notepad, you can play along and try and solve the puzzles while you're listening too. It's
like an escape room inside a podcast.
Yeah, it's like the 1% Club meets an escape room inside a podcast. So have your pen and paper. It's fine. You can pause and just solve the puzzle and then hit play again. So there are a lot of retro gaming references in there, and I don't think many of these issues we were talking about were actually considered much in these games at all. And if you look at something like School Days or indeed Mikey, it's very heteronormative. It's very white. I mean, it's just straight down the middle in the most stereotypical way you can imagine. And it was fun to bump those ideas up against what we were looking at and what we were talking about. And we also throw in a few other little references to high school movies and things like that as well, but that's a different subject altogether. But video games are a big part of this, and I think, and computer games, I think you don't need to know all that stuff to understand it. They all make sense anyway. But one thing that is quite unusual, and I think probably needs a bit of explanation, is the music. And I don't know if everybody knows Grange Hill. Have any of you seen Grange Hill? Now, the theme tune to Grange Hill, Chicken Man by Alan Hawkshaw.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah, it's called Chicken Man. And it is nuts. And it's like, oh yeah, here we go for what was a gritty social realist high school drama. And the theme tune was like... Yeah, right? And so the game features a theme that's very Chicken Man-y. Very authentically Chicken Man-y. It's a bit creepy. Yeah. There's a little bit more not to give anything away, there's another music cue in there that has to be a little bit like something else as well, isn't there? But we can't, yeah. So Katie's had some challenges with this one.
Well, actually, speaking of that, the next question is about sound and music, so that goes on very well. What sound or musical elements were already imagined in the writing stage, and what came later through collaboration with the producers?
Do you want to go first, actually?
Shall I start
starts with the script, yeah.
So it starts before the script. When I outlined this thing, I covered my bedroom with index cards. I mean, all of the walls had index cards stuck on them. And one set of index cards were audio ideas, right? Here's an audio idea. Here's something I haven't heard. What can I challenge Katie with, right? And I'm not saying it hasn't been done. I hadn't heard it. So in the first episode, there's an important moment where a character, very smart character, notices something going on in the audio before the other people do, and it gives them a clue as to what's coming up. And I thought, okay, well, how can we make that so that the audience doesn't quite get it but hears it? Do you know what I mean? So that was like, that's an idea, that's a audio clue. Let's play with that sort of thing. Or I don't know if any of you saw the famous scientific film Powers of 10, which starts on a picnic blanket and comes back at the rate of 1 magnitude of 10 every second until you're like at the extremes of the universe. Well, what would that sound like? And there's at least 2 worlds with distinct sounds in this, aren't there? And there are characters who... So one of the key ideas with the NPC characters inside the game is that they would sound different than natural characters, human characters. And maybe you can talk to that. But anyway, here's the thing. I had a whole list of these index cards with these ideas on, and I thought, I'm going to make sure there's a minimum of 1 new audio idea in every single episode. I thought, I don't really want to force it. And luckily, I didn't have to force it. They just sort of shook out that way. But there was 1 index card minimum per episode, normally 2, where some new audio thing comes in that isn't earlier in the earlier in the series. So it's fun to keep listening to see what happens next.
Yeah, I mean, getting into specifics, the references given were all about. I took late 1970s, early 80s library music basically to be the starting point for everything, not the finishing point though. So I knew very little about this. I went and did a lot of listening to tracks which were produced by a company called KPM Music back then, or KPM Music House, which got taken over by EMI and is now absorbed by Sony, I understand. So basically giants of what is now the library music world. And library music, for those of you who are not familiar with that world, is when very high quality tracks are written, but they're not written specifically to be edited into a production. They're just out there, and music editors and supervisors can choose the right music and edit it in. So it's used a lot in TV, for example, reality TV, stuff like that. So a lot of the theme tunes that we associate from the 80s in British TV are actually library music. A lot of them come from this particular company in some trendy part of London like Fitzrovia. And that's what I was listening to. Grandstand, for example, everyone knows a Grandstand tune. It's a banger. I'd forgotten. But that came from this particular place. So, yeah, I dug into as much as I could the Grange Hill theme without, again, getting to plagiarism territory. But I tried to get the flavour of it, but add a little bit more of its own stamp by using more electronics and that sort of thing. And then we have quite a lot of holding music within the game, which is I based quite a lot on actually kids' TV from that era, the sort of jolly, slightly benign, sort of chill, pottering around feeling. We have one episode which is the challenge. The mission is mostly based around running away. And I actually, for that, my starting point was the theme to a program called Juliet Bravo, which that's where I started, yeah. So that was really fun to do. And then for one NPC character who is described as, if I may, belonging more in St Trinian's than in a 19th century London comprehensive, I actually went back to the classic 1940-something Alistair Sim, Joyce Grenfell St Trinian's films, listened to the Malcolm Arnold score, and then tried to marry that with sort of electronic sort of wallpaper music from a later era, so with a slightly sort of mild, funky sort of overtone, came up with a music which sort of matches that character and her machinations. Is that how you say it? Machinations? I never know. It's one of those words you read and you don't hear, isn't it? So that's where a lot of it came from. We have, in terms of sound worlds, I would say there are three, because I'm allowed to say that we go into the back end a bit as well. The game, well, I did, yeah. So now we know. There is some time interacting with the game back end in various ways for various reasons, and I'd say that is the third. The game engine, yeah. For that I am more using sound design, sort of aural design. I am juxtaposing a basic sort of stereo mix with binaural elements. So out there is, in the real world, stereo mix, quite normal sounding. Bringing in the binaural kind of feels like it's all around your head, kind of way of mixing it in the engine and the more surreal bits in the game itself to try and make it feel as vivid as possible. So it's more of a sonic approach and a musical approach. I think that covers everything. I don't want to go into specific locations because we get into spoilers territory then. But it's a lot about contrasts. It's a lot about dreariness contrasted with sort of dopamine, and a really interesting idea of kind of fake dopamine as well, which really interests me. Because people thinking they're eating sugar and getting the rush, but actually there's no nourishment involved, and unpacking that as a metaphor is really interesting in terms of fairy tales and witches giving you sweeties to lure you into the woods and that sort of thing. I find that quite an interesting thing to play with. So yeah, I think I've said enough. Loza, did you want to add to that?
I don't think I really have anything to add to this one. Yeah.
Well, I do have a question for you specifically, Loz, that changes the subject a little bit, but I wanted to talk about the characters, and you play a character called Reflex. I wanted to ask you what was your casting process like, and what's your favourite part about playing this character, and a bit of a curveball. When you were playing Reflex, were you taking any inspiration from any video game characters from your life?
Oh, interesting. Okay. Casting process, first off. The way I found the role for Reflex is I'm subscribed to a newsletter by Triple C. They're an organisation based in Manchester that give opportunities for disabled artists, and they have a newsletter called the Disabled Artists Networking Community, and I went on there and it said new Rusty Quill audio drama. They're hiring 2 disabled characters, one of which was for try not to spoil or anything here, that's a good point. Our character with Down syndrome, and then the other character was the character who's a wheelchair user. And so I looked on there, read through everything, and I was like, oh, I like the idea of the character as a wheelchair user. But then I saw Reflex on there as well, and I was like, oh, hang on, this character sounds a lot like me in real life. And the way that Reflex was described was being a fixer and a problem solver, whether that's physically fixing things or relationships with friends and family, fixing everything basically. It said that they are currently kind of grappling with their gender identity and how that looks for them, and I was like, fantastic, that's right up my street. Just reading through the sides, and I was like, no way, this is literally me, but in an audio drama, sure, why not, I'll go for it. So yeah, auditioned. Again, it was my first role that I'd actually got, and so I got the email through, and I was like, oh wow, okay, out of all the ones to get, I'm happy that I got that role. Otherwise I'd have been a bit embarrassed that I was so hyped up that it's literally me and then didn't get it. But no, so that was the kind of casting process for me, and then there was a lot of talking to Lucy, the director, and before we started recording in November, Lucy sent us across the script, and then things like a load of questions about like this, what do you think your character's background is and where they are and their family and all sorts of things. And so I think I went on a bit of a hyperfixation for a few days of being like, ooh, what can I discover? Just made loads of notes on the script and about the character, or maybe things that I wanted to kind of make up in a way to kind of fill in the blanks of stuff that I didn't quite know yet. And then when we got to that first recording session, there was me, George, who plays Dogwood, and then Olivia, who plays Josie, and we just sat with Lucy and kind of had put all of our ideas out there and just had a massive chat about who these characters are, where they're from, the setting and everything like that, and then introduced ourselves to each other as well, got to know each other a bit more as well. And so again, Reflex's character, they are a problem solver really at heart. I think the way to describe Reflex that always sticks with me is, in one session Lucy was telling us about the dynamic between the characters, and she said that Josie is very muchly ruled by her heart, Reflex is very muchly ruled by the head, and Dogwood is ruled by his belly, and he only listens to his belly. And that kind of perfectly sums it up, to be honest. They want to help everyone, they want to solve problems, and they want to kind of innovate new solutions to any kind of problem that comes up. And then of course there is that kind of overall character arc of like discovery, kind of figuring out their gender identity, what that looks like for them, how does that look in this new world that they've gone into, and what does that actually mean? So yeah, what was the end of that question? I have forgotten.
Inspiration from video game characters.
That's really interesting.
If any.
I don't know if there was, to be honest. Does that go against the point of the panel? It might do.
Well, let's switch the question around a little bit then. Brendan, when you were writing it, character inspirations from video games.
In the case of Reflex, it's more about introducing a character that can influence video games. I think several of the characters in this story, in the case of Reflex, they spontaneously and independently invent a number of the conventions we know of video games. So we know that you can pause a video game. These characters who've never seen a video game before don't, but they know it would help. So Reflex invents it. Being able to save on a video game, they don't know that's a thing. So Reflex invents it. but then does invent some other things as well. And I think actually, in a way, what you were talking about earlier about the limitations of character creation sort of feed into this. And when you look at this story, there are characters who are well served by the character creation, and there are characters who are not so well served. And I think that tells you about the world that made the game. And I think one of the things we're talking about is that a game, like a book, has an author or authors, and it's made by people who've got a point of view, and they get to lay the map out and say what colour people's skin are, or how tall people are, or whatever it is. And this is a story about reclaiming all of that stuff, I think. Those three things, the head, the heart, and the belly, were three more of my index cards off on my wall, actually, and I organised. Yeah.
Well, we're actually just about at time, but I will leave you with one more question, which is, what are you most excited for the audience to hear from Rez High when it comes out?
I've got the mic, so I'll go first. I think there's a lot. I'm excited for people to hear Katie doing new things that she talked about, but mostly I think it's the relationship, the character arcs, really, the relationships between Josie, Reflex, and Dogwood. And there are characters we haven't mentioned. I just want to briefly mention a few characters, or indeed the cast of those characters, more than give away what their roles are. But there's an actor called Beth Alsbury. You may know her. You may have been lucky enough to have written a TV show for her. But Beth Alsbury's in it, and she's fantastic. And the relationship she has with her character has with another character is really great, and really gets to the heart of a lot of things we're talking about. But it's a nice emotional story, and really impacts on other storylines. And I also want to mention William Kilgore, who was the actor cast as the character with Down syndrome, and Christine Walsh, who plays Reflex's mother. They're not here, and they're smaller roles, but I think you won't forget them. You'll remember they're there. But then an actor, and I'm not going to say anything about their role, but they're in the trailer. And it's Katie Norris, who you may know as a stand-up comedian. Femme Fatale was her big show, which was huge last year. And she plays the single most unusual character in the whole thing. And you're doing very interesting things with that character. And she's done very interesting things with that character. And it's not what I expected, but it's everything I expected and more on top. So it's thrilling. So those are that's 10% of the things I'm excited about you hearing.
Brilliant.
Amazing. Yeah, that particular character is the one time I wheeled out the Dolby Atmos to get things all over the place. Very fun. Gosh, this is such a hard question. I'd like to be a bit more generalised in my answer. I am really interested in the audience getting to the end and finding out what happens to the end of the character's journey. You're very lucky I didn't get an opportunity. I was going to waffle on about fairy tales some more, but I haven't got into that. But I do find it very interesting to think about this story in particular, and maybe sometimes video game playing in general. So sort of having an aspect of sort of entering into the woods, knowing that something is going to happen and it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to sort of draw on your own resilience and find your way through, the little guy surviving out there in the world. Those kinds of themes are going to, I think, are present. And I think where it ends up in terms of we've been to sort of a long time ago, far, far away and all that sort of thing, and we come home to a particular place. I think it's a great ending, and I'm looking forward to the audience getting there. So that's what I'm going to say.
I was going to say the end as well. You're allowed. That last episode is very from what I remember, because obviously my memories are just from recording stuff. I've not seen it all pieced together. Yeah. So from what I remember, that last episode is quite jam-packed and, whoa, look at all this stuff that's happening. So I'm really looking forward to people seeing that, but then also what Brendan said about Josie, Dogwood and Reflex, their relationship together and how that develops over time and how they work together. I think that coincided with me, George and Olivia getting to know each other more as well. Again, like at the start when we first met each other, you know, we were all getting used to the recording process. We'd not met each other before. And Lucy was like trying to, like we were introducing each other, like where are we all from? Which parts of Yorkshire or slightly not Yorkshire are we from? And it was and so it, like getting used to each other there, and then as we got into more recording sessions with each other, like we knew the structure of what was going on, we knew who our characters were, and everything just got much speedier. But then also we got used to how each other recorded together, and that again I think helped with the relationship actually in Rez High of these three characters, how they get along with each other. Because I kind of think at the start that Josie and Dogwood, they're the best mates, you know, they're going off together. Reflex is there, they're still mates, but it's those two that are closer. And as that time goes on, they really start to develop as a trio that kind of each have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they all know what those are, and they all help each other out with those things. So that's what I'm really looking forward to seeing, how that develops. And I think as well with Rez High as well, like what you were saying about originally about like Black Mirror and how it's quite topical with how's technology bad and this is good. I think it's coming at a pretty nice time when the world's not a great place, which I think is putting it pretty lightly. But I think it tackles a lot of things. We've got 3 young adults from the north of England in a thing together. There's all these topical things about accessibility, disability representation, gender identity. You know, it's really jam-packed. You've packed a lot of like really good things in one audio drama. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to.
A lot more than we've said as well.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot.
There's a lot in there.
I completely believe that we could sit here for 2 hours
But
and not run out of
I
things to
think
talk
we've
about.
got to play trailer one more time, because I think if we can play it one more time before we go,
Yeah,
people will hear it with different ears this time.
let's go. Wait, let me go around.
Let your way. Loza, will you take the mic?
They used to call this place Yorkshire, hundreds of years ago. Now it's mostly sea, but we're still here, the few of us who live in Rivermill.
I hate it up here. We should have met somewhere else.
Give me the top 3 reasons you hate the book room.
1, it's all the way at the top of the climb. 2, it's always really muggy. And 3, all these boxes are disgusting things screwing and then eating each other. It's revolting.
There's not much left of the past. Scraps, mostly rust and rubbish, but sometimes we find something good, something strange, something we might be able to learn from.
Prepare to have your minds blown.
Welcome to Rez High, your virtual recreation of a 1979 London comprehensive.
It's like a dream, but a dream where you're awake.
Reflex, where did all those people over there come from? Who are they?
They're not real. They're part of the dream.
What a waste for a dream. Where's all the sword fighting and...
Sex?
I was gonna say kissing.
There used to be a better world, Dogwood. Right here. I'm gonna find out what happened to it. Then maybe we'll have some idea how to undo things and get it back.
Mission 1. Kiss chase. Your crush wants to meet you. Escape your class, find your crush, and kiss them. Good luck.
So, history is being held hostage unless I kiss somebody to get it. Slagging crudlark. For a detailed recreation of the ancient world, it doesn't actually tell us much about the ancient world.
What were you expecting? A world on fire? Floods coming through every doorway?
This machine is our only chance to find out why the world ended and just maybe how to undo it. Any risk is worth it.
Mission 2. Bully for you. Mad Monk the school bully is hot on your tail. Stay out of his way until break time ends.
Dogwood, Mad Monk is looking for you.
He's going to clobber me if he catches me.
He's going to clobber you if he catches you.
I can run, or I can hide.
You can run.
Or you can hide.
Just as soon as you let me.
But whatever you're going to do it now.
Mission 3, Heist School. The history exam is fast approaching and you're doomed to fail. Your only hope is the exam answers locked in the head safe.
All of the people, all the weird missions, they're not helpful at all. The people inside Rez High don't even seem to know their world is about to end. Turn the firewall off for me, and then confirm you've done it.
I'm doing it now. The wall between worlds is coming down.
Whoa. Oh, okay. This doesn't feel very safe.
No. But then again, none of this is.
Rusty Quill presents Rez High. To listen, subscribe to Neon Inkwell wherever you get your podcasts.
There are loads more things at Tuck's shop I wanted to try.
Well, all it remains then is for me to say thank you so much for coming. You can listen to Rez High when it drops on rustyquill.com later in the summer. And I just want to thank Brendan Connolly, Katie Seaton, and Loza Gilbert for coming out and talking to you all today.